Hey, how's it going, everybody? Haven here, and welcome back to episode 3 of Haven's Corner. For those of you new here on the podcast, we talk about things from books to TV shows to movies to OCs. And today's going to be a bit of a long one because I'm going to be talking about my ShrewSquirrel AU. Content warning, however, before we jump into this, these are all my opinions. Everyone is entitled to their own, and I respect that. So please don't start arguments in the comments, mainly because there are some details that I go into that will kind of bring up past events. Second, this video does go into a bit of graphic detail in some parts, so if you're a younger viewer or are sensitive to the topics on the screen, then I suggest you click away now. Thirdly, this isn't canon to the Warriors books, this is my AU and my interpretation if ShrewPaw had lived. With that being said, let's just jump right into this. For those of you who don't know what ShrewSquirrel is, ShrewSquirrel is a ship name given to two cats, ShrewPaw and SquirrelFlight. The fandom has been shipping these two for a while now, and has recently had a surge after the whole Bramblestar controversy that I won't get into. I will say this will cover portions of Dawn, Starlight, Twilight, and most importantly Sunset of the New Prophecy and Leafpool's Wish. Let's take a moment and go over the events of the first books mentioned briefly. The traveling cats have returned from their journey to find Midnight, who turned out to be a talking badger, or a badger who spoke cat. Brambleclaw, Squirrelpaw, and Stormfur were escorted from the destroyed ThunderClan camp by the medicine cat Cinderpelt. The ThunderClan cats have moved their camp to Sunning Rocks thanks to the two legs destroying their home. As soon as Squirrelpaw enters camp, she is immediately greeted by an excited and worried ShrewPaw, who is eager to see her again. The two apprentices take the time to help the clan while catching up, with Squirrelpaw telling him about the journey and all they encountered, while ShrewPaw told her about the monsters and the move to the Sunning Rocks. Not too much happens here besides trying to help their clan to make up for the lost time of being away. ShrewPaw and Brackenfur were out hunting on a particularly gloomy day in hopes of finding some sort of prey. ShrewPaw manages to track down a pheasant and gives chase to it. However, the pheasant crosses the thunderpath. ShrewPaw follows it, but stops dead in his tracks as the ground beneath him begins to rumble. He looks up to see a monster racing towards him. ShrewPaw tried to scramble away as best he could, but there was a sudden shock of pain and a thud before he passed out. Brackenfur watched the whole thing unfold. As soon as he was sure the monster was gone, he raced over to ShrewPaw. He was still breathing. The warrior examined him for a moment before his gaze landed on his back leg, which was covered in blood and was twisted in a sickening way. Brackenfur quickly shuffled the apprentice on his back, carrying him away as quickly and carefully as he could, hoping he could make it back to camp for his sister and Leafpaw to save him. When he was brought back to camp, Squirrelpaw stayed by his side as Cinderpelt and Leafpaw did their best to help the apprentice, but unfortunately they couldn't save his leg. When ShrewPaw finally woke up, he was faced with the sight of what happened. His tail was gone and his leg was twisted. Squirrelpaw was still by his side and comforted him while he processed this. Together, the two of them managed to get ShrewPaw back on his feet, and come time that they left for the lake, he was becoming stronger, learning how to hunt and fight again with help from Cinderpelt and Brightheart. When they got to the lake and settled into their homes, Firestar gave ShrewPaw, and Spiderpaw their warrior names, SquirrelFlight, Shrewheart, and Spiderleg. They had all gotten their warrior names together, and it was the most amazing feeling to Shrewheart. Little did the two cats know that their troubles were only just beginning. Moving on to the more focus-based books. After the battle with Mudclaw, the clan was taking care of themselves again. SquirrelFlight has been seemingly on edge with Brambleclaw, from what Shrewheart could see. He knew the pair were like siblings to each other, but he couldn't help but feel something was off. Not to mention, Ashfur was getting a little too cozy in their friend group, and was seemingly always wanting to talk to her. ShrewHeart knew, however, that it wasn't his business. He trusted Squirrelflight. She can take care of herself. On Squirrelflight's end, she was noticing something was off with her sister. After the battle, she seemed different. Sure, it had taken a toll on all of them, but how badly had it affected Leafpool? Not only that, but she had caught her sneaking out once or twice. But every time she tried to follow, she seemed to lose track of her. Not only that, but just as Shrewpaw, she noticed Brambleclaw was very on edge, even snapping at her a few times. And then you had Ashfur. She didn't mind hanging out with the Tom, of course, but she was beginning to pick up red flags. He would always speak over her whenever things got heated with Brambleclaw. She explained her feelings with ShrewHeart, and ShrewHeart was supportive about her feelings. When Squirrelflight followed Leafpool out again, she managed to catch her before she disappeared completely. She found out that her sister was meeting with the WindClan warrior Crowfeather, and they were going to run away that evening. Squirrelflight was upset about this, and tried to convince her to stay. However, it wasn't enough, and Leafpool left for good. Squirrelflight went back to camp, exhausted physically and emotionally. ShrewHeart must have noticed she was missing, because he was sitting in the clearing, looking worried. When she saw him, she went over and sat beside him, telling him about how Leafpool was leaving. ShrewHeart comforted her before the two turned in for the night once more. When Cinderpelt found out that Leafpool was gone, a patrol was set to find her. The only two who knew about it were ShrewHeart and Squirrelflight, but they said nothing about it. Leafpool would come back home sooner or later, right? The Badgers attacked shortly after. The camp was in shambles. Badgers were breaking everything, while ThunderClan tried to hold them off. Squirrelflight was grappling with one of the Badgers when she saw Leafpool and Crowfeather rush into camp, heading for the nursery. Distracted for a mere second, the Badger tries to swipe, but it is stopped by Shrewpaw, who was clawing at its face. Squirrelflight managed to scramble away before jumping in again and fighting alongside him. Once the Badgers were gone, with the help of WindClan of course, Squirrelflight went to find her sister, who was saying goodbye to Crowfeather. Squirrelflight and ShrewHeart watched together, both concerned and saddened by the sight in front of them. As soon as Crowfeather left, the two came over and comforted her. Not long after the Badger attack, however, Squirrelflight and Ashfur had a falling out, and things with Brambleclaw were becoming more tense, mainly because she was suspicious of Hawkfrost, his half-brother. Brambleclaw thought it was because it was the fact that their father was Tigerclaw, but Squirrelflight felt something off about him rather than who their father was. Of course, she was right when she found Brambleclaw freeing Firestar from a foxtrap, while Hawkfrost had a stake through his throat. ShrewHeart and Leafpool were with her at the time, and they managed to help Firestar back to camp where Leafpool managed to patch him back up. Brambleclaw and Squirrelflight made amends, and ShrewHeart and Squirrelflight became mates. As you can tell, I did try to shorten it as best as I can to make it bite-sized. I do want to make it clear that I did try to keep things in character while putting my own twist on things. If I go OOC, I apologize greatly. As a bit of a wrap-up of the second arc, I wanted to explain some changes I made with some of the more secondary characters. Brambleclaw still kept his personality while being more of a big brother figure than a love interest. I made things flow easier rather than him loving Squirrelflight. It feels uncomfortable because, all things considered, she was still an apprentice around the time that they started growing feelings for each other. As for Ashfur, I gave him more of the clingy friend personality while still having his obsessiveness. All other characters pretty much remain the same. Before we jump into Leafpool's wish, however, I do want to say that I do tend to go on a bit of a tangent, especially since this book is probably one of those books that get me heated over the topics and how things are handled. So, without wasting any more time, let's finish out this episode. We're jumping a little bit of time from when we last left off. Squirrelflight and Brambleclaw are having a friendly sibling fight, while was helping Leafpool with Firestar, who was still recovering from the fox trap. While the two cats are going about their duties, ShrewHeart notices something off with Leafpool. He tries to check in on her and make sure she's okay, but she just brushes him off. When ShrewHeart talks to Squirrelflight about this, she becomes a little bit worried. This was her sister, after all, and she knew how things had been with Cinderpelt now gone, and the whole thing with Crowfeather going south after the battle with the Badgers. Jumping to about another moon or so later, Leafpool is for sure she is expecting Crowfeather's kids. While about her duty, she reflects on the past while watching Cinderkit, who seemed much older in her moons than she realized. She also watches the kids play, thinking maybe Crowfeather would have been a good father. She shakes her head, saying to herself that she can't have these kids. Later on, she goes to confront StarClan on the matter, where she meets with Spotted Leaf, who was reprimanding her. Yellowfang, however, steps in, taking Leafpool into the forest where she explains to her about Broken Star. When Leafpool asks if having him was a mistake, Yellowfang straight up tells her that all life is precious. Yeah, should've thought about that one during the StarClan trial, buddy. Besides that, Leafpool feels guilty for doing so, and Yellowfang tells her that she did break the coded one away, but not the other. That's the best I can put with that interaction. Leafpool wakes up and goes back to camp, where she decides to confide in both Squirrelflight and ShrewHeart. While Squirrelflight was surprised and a little upset by this, she was still concerned for her sister. Both her and ShrewHeart promised to support her in whatever decision she makes. Leafpool is grateful for the support. Then ShrewHeart mentions that they should tell Crowfeather about the kids. While Leafpool is hesitant at first, she agrees after some thought. A couple of days later, they were at the WindClan border, acting on dawn patrol. Just over the hill, Crowfeather and a dawn patrol are spotted. Nightcloud, who was beside him, pointed out to Crowfeather that there were ThunderClan cats at the border. Crowfeather tells them to go on without him, and he approaches the three cats. ShrewHeart greets him with a friendly look before looking to Leafpool. Leafpool hesitates before telling him. At first, Crowfeather is unsure how to react before letting out a sigh. He doesn't seem happy about this, but he wasn't angry either. Well, he brings up the fact that they have to remain loyal to their clan, quoting Leafpool from before. He said he would be there if she needed help when the kids come. When they part ways, Leafpool feels like a weight has been lifted off her shoulders. However, things weren't going to get better. Leafpool, Squirrelflight, and ShrewHeart are at the moon pool together, speaking with StarClan. Leafpool is begging Yellowfang to help. Yellowfang wakes up both ShrewHeart and Squirrelflight, introducing herself. She says that Squirrelflight must help raise the kids with ShrewHeart. However, when Squirrelflight refuses, Yellowfang flat out lies about her being barren, saying that this was the only way that she could ever be a mother. Squirrelflight is devastated by this. ShrewHeart jumps in, trying to help comfort her. When they wake up, they head back to camp in silence, needing to come up with a decision on what to do next. Thank you all for listening in. I am so sorry. I was not expecting it to be this long. I tend to get carried away when it comes to writing, so I try to lighten it up a little bit. I do plan on writing a fanfiction based off this in the future, but for now, you all get to have this little piece of media. With that out of the way, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.